Hi class, in this video we're going to be talking about blood vessels, okay? So blood vessels are the delivery system for blood, and blood of course carries, very importantly, oxygen to our tissues. Blood also carries carbon dioxide and waste back to the lungs to be expelled, okay? So our blood vessels are very important to get nutrients to all of our tissues throughout our bodies, okay? So we have arteries, which you probably remember from the heart, right? Arteries carry blood away from the heart. So arteries away, okay? Veins carry blood back to the heart. Back to the heart. Okay, so always remember arteries carry blood away from the heart. And generally these arteries are going to be carrying oxygen-rich blood, okay, because they're carrying blood away from the heart to the tissues. Except in the case, remember, of the pulmonary arteries, which carried oxygen-poor blood right to the lungs to be oxygenated, okay? And typically veins are going to be oxygen-poor blood. They're going to carry oxygen-poor blood back to the heart to get oxygenated by the lungs, okay? Except in the case of the pulmonary veins, right? Which carried oxygen-rich blood from the lungs back to the heart, okay? But in general, that's usually the case, okay? But always arteries carry blood away from the heart, veins carry blood back to the heart. We have something else, smaller, very, very, very small vessels known as capillaries. These are very small vessels, one layer of simple squamous epithelia thick, okay? And that epithelia can actually open up and allow red blood cells to exit to bring the oxygen to the tissue, okay? So capillaries are in direct contact with our tissues, okay? So these serve our cellular needs of the body, okay? In general, our blood vessels, I'm just gonna put BV for blood vessels, have 3 layers, okay? And we'll talk about specifically with arteries and veins what those layers are. So specifically they have an innermost layer, which is the tunica intima, also known as the tunica interna. Okay, so we'll call it tunica intima or interna. Okay, so this is the innermost layer of a blood vessel. So this is going to be adjacent to the lumen, which is the opening inside the blood vessel where blood is going to flow. Okay, so tunica intima or interna. Then we have the tunica media, media like middle. And this is going to be made up of smooth muscle and elastic fibers as well, okay? So our blood vessels can constrict, okay, for different reasons to control our blood pressure, basically, okay? So we'll go through that, but that's what this layer is for, the tunica media, okay? And then we have the tunica externa. That's the outermost layer of a blood vessel. And this is the layer that will be adjacent to the tissue surrounding the blood vessel because it's the outermost layer. Okay, it's the tunica externa. Okay, so let's start by talking about the tunica intima. So you can think of like intima, like it has intimate contact with the blood, okay? So this is made up of endothelium, specifically simple squamous epithelium, and this lines the lumen of all blood vessels, okay? So simple squamous epithelium, okay? So this has a slick surface, it's not going to be sticky in any way, to prevent, blood from getting stuck anywhere and prevent clotting within the blood vessel. okay? So it also has a subendothelial layer, which is a basement membrane surrounding the tunica intima. Okay, so this is connective tissue, right? Our basement membrane has connective tissue, and it's made up of loose areolar connective tissue. Okay, but the subendothelial layer is only found in a bit larger blood vessels, larger than 1 millimeter. Okay, so that basement membrane would prevent blood vessels from breaking. Okay, if we have like high blood pressure, for example, in those larger vessels. Okay. Okay, so the internal elastic lamina is a layer between the tunica intima and tunica media, and it's made up of fibrillin, collagen, and other proteins as well. Okay, so one syndrome where that is an issue is Marfan syndrome. So in that case, you have longer limbs. I believe we talked about this in bones last semester. Okay, and you also have a lack of fibrillin. And Ehlers-Danlos syndrome as well, you have a lack of collagen in that elastic lamina layer. Okay, so both of those diseases, Marfan and Ehlers-Danlos syndrome, increase your risk of aortic dissection, which is a tear in the wall of the artery. Okay, so it makes the blood vessel more vulnerable. Okay, our tunica media, again, this is made up of smooth muscle tissue. Okay, so it's the middle layer of the blood vessel. Our sympathetic nerve fibers innervate this layer here. Okay, so vasoconstriction, they control vasoconstriction, so decreasing the lumen size. Okay, that would increase our blood pressure. If we had too low of a blood pressure, then we would need that vasoconstriction. Vasodilation would be increasing, right, increasing the lumen diameter. And this would decrease our blood pressure, right? If we're trying to push the same amount of something through a smaller area, the blood pressure would increase. Through a larger area, the blood pressure would decrease, right? Okay. So this is the bulkiest layer, it's the thickest layer because it's made up of muscle. Okay, so it helps to maintain our blood flow and blood pressure, right, via vasoconstriction and vasodilation. Okay, and then we have an external elastic lamina between the tunica media and tunica externa, made up of also proteins, collagen, and fibrillin. Okay, so it allows the blood vessels to stretch and recoil. So it allows them to have what's known as elasticity. So elasticity is being able to stretch and then go back to your regular conformation or regular shape. Okay. Then we have our tunica externa. This is the outermost layer. It's also known as the tunica adventitia, and it's made up of dense, irregular connective tissue. Okay, so it's mostly loose collagen fibers, and those will protect and reinforce the wall and then anchor it to surrounding structures. So you don't want our blood vessels being able to move around too much. Okay. Okay. Okay, so one difference between our arteries and veins, our arteries just have an open lumen. Our veins have valves in them, and those valves prevent backflow. So you would have, I'm not a great drawer, but let's say this is an open vein here. You'd have these valves set up like this, okay? And our muscles actually help to push blood back to the heart. So blood coming from our lower extremities, like our legs, they need to go against gravity, right? They need to come up to the heart, okay? So our muscles will actually contract, and so say we have muscles like in our calf, right, surrounding this vein, they're going to contract and help squeeze the blood up slowly back to the heart, okay? Let's draw another valve here. They have multiple valves, right, per vein. So once it's squeezed up, this valve is going to open up, blood's going to enter into this area, and then the pressure of the blood trying to flow back due to gravity, is going to close this vessel here, okay? So it's going to close this vessel here and you'll have the blood sitting there. Then the muscle is going to squeeze again a little bit higher up, push the blood up here into this area of the vein, and then the blood trying to flow back is going to close this valve, and then it's just going to keep getting pushed up all the way back to the heart through the inferior vena cava. Okay. Arteries are just open. They're high pressure systems. So the heart pushes the blood everywhere else it needs to go in the body. So arteries don't need these valves preventing backflow, okay? Because backflow just really doesn't happen there in arteries. Okay. So arteries, they're going to regulate their own diameter because of that tunica media. Arteries have a very thick tunica media. Okay, veins have a lot smaller of a tunica media, so they need a little bit more help. But arteries can regulate their own diameter because of how much smooth muscle they have. Okay, so we're going to talk about two types of arteries. We have elastic arteries, also known as conducting arteries. These are large diameter arteries, so they're about 1 to 1.5 centimeters. So this is like the aorta and the branches off of the aorta. Okay, those are going to be elastic arteries. They have more elastic fiber compared to smooth muscle, so they have less smooth muscle. And they're like pressure reservoirs, so they allow for blood to flow continuously throughout the body, even between beats of the heart. Okay, so they help with that high pressure system within arteries. Then we have muscular arteries, also known as distributing arteries. They have a medium diameter of about 6 millimeters. Okay, so they have more smooth muscle related to elastic fibers. So they have a little bit less elastic fibers. And they have a very thick tunica media, right? Because they have more muscle fibers. So that's what tunica media is made up of, muscle. Okay, so these muscular arteries distribute blood to the tissues. Okay, so this would be like the renal arteries, the splenic arteries, etc., that directly go to the different tissues of the body. Okay, so these muscular arteries are active in vasoconstriction, so they'll constrict, okay, to help blood flow. Okay, then we have arterioles. Okay, these are the smallest type of artery. They're about 35 micrometers, so they're very small. They branch off of our other arteries, okay? So we have larger arterioles and smaller arterioles. Our larger arterioles are going to have all three of these layers or tunics. But smaller are mostly just going to be a single layer of smooth muscle that surrounds endothelial cells. Okay. So these are known as precapillary sphincters, so they'll lead into the capillaries, which are those very small vessels that deliver oxygen to our tissues. Okay. So sympathetic nervous system would cause those arterioles to constrict. Okay, and allow blood to enter into the capillaries. Okay. So between vasodilation and constriction, there's a control of movement of blood into the capillaries, from arterioles into capillaries. Okay. These arterioles are also known as resistance arteries because when they constrict and dilate, it changes the flow of blood. Okay, and again, arterioles are going to lead to our capillary beds. Okay. Okay, let's talk about what an anastomosis is quickly. So an anastomosis is where two or more arteries that supply the same region of the body unite with each other. Okay, so there's an alternate route of blood flow to lots of different areas of the body. Okay. If arteries do not form an anastomosis, they're known as end arteries. Okay. And if an end artery is blocked, then blood has no other way of getting to that tissue, and it can cause necrosis or tissue to die. Okay, let's talk about capillaries. Capillaries are very small, they're microscopic vessels, and they connect arterioles to venules, which are smaller veins that branch off from larger veins. Okay, so capillary walls, right? Again, we have a single layer of epithelial cells surrounded by one layer of a basement membrane. Okay, so the walls are very, very thin, so they could allow exchange of things across the vessel. Okay, so they can allow an exchange of blood to tissue and back. Okay. Okay. Okay, so the function of capillaries, again, exchange of gases, exchange of nutrients, waste, hormones as well are exchanged through the capillaries. Okay, so between the blood and the interstitial fluid. Okay, so we have our capillaries. Let's just draw some capillaries here. They're going to have cells right near them. Okay, so this is a cell, maybe it makes up an organ, right? Between the capillaries, so here we'll just draw these. And these are going to be connected to arterioles and venules, of course. We have our red blood cells flowing through here. Okay, we have our red blood cells flowing through here, right? Blood. So I'm just going to draw a few red blood cells. Now these are connected. Let's draw out our capillary a bit larger. So we're going to have our simple squamous epithelia. This is what makes up the capillary wall here. Okay, and then let's see, this is like the lumen inside, and then we have our simple squamous making up the other side of the wall here. Okay, and what happens is these can kind of separate and allow our red blood cell to exit into the space surrounding the capillary. So between our capillary and our tissue is going to be interstitial fluid. So there's just fluid flowing within here, right? Our body's made up of lots and lots of water. So there's fluid between the tissue and the capillary here, okay? So red blood cells escape there. They release oxygen here, it gets to the tissue, and then the blood cell can just squeeze back in to the capillary bed, and now it's going to flow to the venules and then to the veins back to the heart. Okay. Okay, we have three different types of capillaries. So continuous capillaries. So let's use a different color here. Okay. So three types of capillaries. Continuous. These are found in high numbers in the skin, okay, in the muscles, in the lungs, and in the central nervous system. So these have small intercellular clefts or openings, okay? But in the brain, they're unique, right? Because they help to form the blood-brain barrier. So in the brain, they're enclosed with tight junctions, okay, and no intercellular clefts. But everywhere else where they're found, they have intercellular clefts or openings so that blood can get through, blood cells can get through, okay? So continuous capillaries are like kind of like what I drew here. So you have your layer of simple squamous cells, and then it's surrounded by a basement membrane. So this here will be the basement membrane, okay? So just typical, and then you have blood cells flowing through there as well, okay? Then we have fenestrated capillaries. Fenestrated. Okay, so fenestrated capillaries. These are found in areas where there's filtration, absorption, or endocrine hormone secretion. Okay, so filtration happens in the kidneys, right? Kidneys filter blood to make urine. Absorption happens mostly in the small intestine, a little bit in the large intestine. Okay, so you find fenestrated capillaries in the intestines, in the kidneys, and where hormones are secreted. Okay, so in those endocrine organs or areas. Okay, so in fenestrated capillaries, they have a Swiss cheese-like pores that are called fenestrations. Okay, and this is for increased permeability. Okay, so within these cells here, there would be these holes or fenestrations. And it just kind of looks like Swiss cheese. So you can look at the PowerPoint, it shows a better picture of it. But openings for more things to be able to filter through there, because we need more things to exit, like hormones. In the kidneys, lots of things are passed through between the kidneys, and lots of things are reabsorbed, right? Like water is reabsorbed, glucose is reabsorbed for the most part, vitamins, etc. So you need lots of things to be able to pass through fenestrated capillaries because of where they are found. Okay, then we have sinusoidal. Okay, so sinusoidal capillaries. In sinusoidal capillaries, there are less tight junctions. So these sinusoidal are usually fenestrated, and they have larger intercellular clefts. Okay, they also have an incomplete basement membrane, so there would be like openings within the basement membrane as well to really let things through. Okay, so it's kind of more like this. This would be more like a sinusoidal capillary. Okay, so in sinusoidal capillaries, blood flow is very slow. This allows time for proteins to carry different things throughout the blood. Okay, so we have proteins in the blood like albumin, and that carries hormones, enzymes, and vitamins. Okay, and it also allows more time for blood to pass through to the tissues surrounding the capillary. Okay, so you can find these sinusoidal capillaries in the liver, red bone marrow, and the spleen. So what is a capillary bed? A capillary bed is a network of capillaries. Okay, and they're found between our arterioles and our venules. Okay, so far we go from the heart. Let's draw like a little flow chart here. To our arteries, right? Blood flows from, it gets oxygenated in the lungs, then to the heart. Oxygenated blood gets sent to the arteries. It flows into the arterioles, which are found coming off of arteries. Arterioles. Then into our capillaries. So we'll say capillary beds. Then we haven't talked about these yet, but we're going to get to them. Then it goes into the venules. Okay, now we've dropped off from our capillary beds, we've dropped off the oxygen from our red blood cells. So now oxygen poor blood goes into the venules, then to the veins, then back to the heart, right? And how does it go back to the heart? Through the superior and inferior vena cava and the coronary sinus, right? So this is kind of the flow of blood in a little bit more detail, okay? Okay, so microcirculation, this is flow of blood from the arteriole to the venule. So this all here would be our microcirculation, okay? So at a smaller level there, okay? We talked about this already, but a terminal arteriole is the branch of the arteriole that branches into the capillary beds, okay? So it's an exchange vessel, okay? Okay, and then the capillaries will drain into a post-capillary venule. Okay, so the flow into capillary beds, so the flow of blood into our capillary beds, is controlled by the diameter of the terminal arteriole, which is the arteriole that leads into the capillary bed. Okay, and the flow from the upstream arterioles as well. Okay. So different chemicals and nerve fibers will regulate how much blood can enter from the arteriole or terminal arteriole into the capillary bed. Okay, so when we need blood, the arterioles and terminal arterioles are going to be dilated, and then they'll be constricted and not allow blood in when we don't need any more oxygen to that tissue at that given moment, right? Sometimes we need extra oxygen to a tissue, like when we're in fight or flight mode, then they will dilate, right, and allow more blood in. Okay, but then when we're in our rest and digest system, right, then they can constrict again, okay, because we don't need as much blood in that area. Okay. Okay. Okay, now let's talk about venules. So venules are smaller veins, right? And they're formed from the union of several capillaries. And these drain blood from the capillaries into the veins. Okay, so they're about 20 micrometers wide in diameter. Okay, and then veins here, these are formed from the union of several venules, and they're about 5 millimeters in diameter. Okay, so veins have a thinner tunica media compared to arteries, like we talked about. Okay, and a thinner tunica interna, but a thicker tunica externa. So they have less elastic tissue and less smooth muscle than arteries. And like we talked about, also veins contain these valves to prevent backflow of blood. Okay, so veins are a much lower pressure system than arteries. Remember I said arteries are a high pressure system. Okay, so they don't have as much muscle, so of course they're a lot lower pressure. So the muscle, again, surrounding the vein has to help push the blood back up to the heart. Okay. Our veins are well known as being a blood reservoir. So at any given time, our veins carry about 70% of our blood volume, and that's because it takes so long to get that blood back to the heart compared to how long it takes for arteries to bring blood to our tissues. Okay. Now, when we need to maintain our blood pressure in our arteries, the veins can constrict. Okay. So that helps to maintain our blood pressure if we're experiencing a high blood loss. Okay, they can help keep that pressure system going. Okay. You'll see arteries and veins under the microscope in the PowerPoint slides and in lab as well. But arteries usually have a very large lumen, and it's usually regularly shaped. And then you have a thick tunica media here, okay? So they're a lot thicker than the veins, and then you have this other outer layer, the tunica externa, and this would be the lumen here. Veins are a lot thinner, and the lumen is usually irregularly shaped in veins, so it'd be something like this. Okay, and then you'd have a thinner tunica media. I'm not going to draw it out that well, but something like this. And then the tunica externa surrounding that. Okay, so it's not going to be as thick as the artery there. Okay, so make sure you look at the actual pictures. It's not a great drawing here, but it's usually pretty easy to tell arteries versus veins under the microscope. Okay. Okay. So venous return, this is how much blood flows back to the heart through the systemic veins of the body. Okay, and this occurs, right, blood being sent back to the heart because of the pressure generated by the heart's contractions, specifically of the left ventricle. Okay, so venous return is assisted by these valves, right, which we talked about in detail. The respiratory pump, which we'll talk about, and the skeletal muscle pump. So the skeletal muscle pump was the pumping of the blood from the surrounding skeletal muscle. Okay. The respiratory pump, this is changes in pressure due to breathing, right? Respiratory, like respiration, like breathing. Okay. And those pressure changes help to move blood back toward the heart as well through the veins. Okay. So by squeezing our abdominal veins, as our thoracic veins expand. Okay. There's also sympathetic vasoconstriction, so through our sympathetic nerves. And so this is under our sympathetic nerve control. Our smooth muscles will constrict, and that also helps to push blood back toward the heart. Okay. Okay, so let's talk about homeostatic imbalance, varicose veins. So this can be caused by standing for very long periods of time. It can be caused by pregnancy, obesity, a few other different things. So when the veins expand, the space between the valves is going to increase as well. Okay, due to standing long periods of time, pregnancy, or lots of weight gain, right, or obesity. Okay, so these valves can actually become leaky due to this, or incompetent, so they don't work anymore. Okay, and in this case, the blood would flow back down, going toward gravity, right? And it would pool in a specific area of the body. So this is why you usually get varicose veins in your lower legs or in your feet. Okay. So this can cause twisting of the vein as well. This is also common in the testes, where it's known as varicocele. Okay. If we have too high of venous pressure, this can also cause varicose veins. Okay. So when delivering a baby, right, straining and pushing, that can cause high venous pressure and can cause varicose veins. Or having a bowel movement, this can also raise our intra-abdominal pressure, increasing our venous return. Okay. So specifically when having a bowel movement, that varicosity, those varicose veins are known as hemorrhoids.